the Banda Islands, part of the Moluccas in what is now Indonesia. They renamed New Amsterdam, New York, in honor of the Duke of York. The Dutch were not foolish. In the end, the deal of 1667 remains one of history's greatest ironies. In the spring of 1667, two maps of the world were quietly redrawn. On one side of the globe, a small island in Southeast Asia passed into Dutch hands. On the other, a patch of land at the edge of North America slipped into English control. The trade seemed ordinary at the time, yet looking back today, it is one of the strangest exchanges in the history of wealth. The island was tiny, covered in volcanic soil and tropical forest. The land in America, it would one day become New York City, the financial capital of the world. This is the story of how the Dutch traded away Manhattan for nutmeg. A tale of power, spice, and irony, where fortunes were won and lost, and the world's maps were forever changed. To understand this deal, we need to go back to the 1600s, a time when Europe was obsessed with spices. Nutmeg, mace, cloves, and pepper were not just flavors for the table. They were treasures. A single handful of nutmeg could sell for the price of a cow in London. A bag of cloves might pay the rent of a London townhouse for an entire year. Spices promised health, luxury, and prestige. Doctors believed nutmeg could cure plague. Aristocrats sprinkled it in wine. Housewives used it in pies and stews, and merchants saw it as pure gold. In a Europe where food was often bland and preservation difficult, spices were more than taste. They were status. Whoever controlled the spice trade controlled a river of wealth. But there was a catch. These spices grew only in one tiny corner of the world, the Banda Islands, part of the Moluccas in what is now Indonesia. 10 small dots in the ocean, volcanic and remote, became the focus of empires. By the early 1600s, two great trading companies emerged as rivals: the Dutch East India Company, known as the VOC, and the English East India Company. Both were private enterprises backed by governments. Both raised money from investors, built fleets of ships, and armed themselves with cannons. They were not just merchants, they were corporate armies. The Dutch dominated. Their navy was stronger, their ships more numerous, and their traders more ruthless. The English, however, had ambition. They managed to establish a foothold on one of the Banda Islands, a little place called Run. It was barely 2 miles long, covered in forest, with a few thousand native inhabitants. But Run was priceless. It grew nutmeg trees, every branch, every leaf, every seed a fortune. The Dutch considered the Bandas their rightful monopoly. They wanted nutmeg all for themselves. For years, Dutch and English forces clashed over Run, sending fleets across the seas, building forts, and sometimes even burning villages. The spice wars were not polite trade disputes. They were brutal, bloody, and often cruel to the islanders caught in between. While all this was happening in Asia, the Dutch also had colonies in the Americas. In 1626, Dutch settlers famously purchased the island of Manhattan from Native Americans, reportedly for goods worth just 60 guilders, a bargain often compared to a few dollars in today's money. They called their colony New Amsterdam. But New Amsterdam was not yet New York. It was small, rough, and far less valuable than the rich Spice Islands. To the Dutch, Manhattan was a distant outpost, useful for fur trade, a port for ships, and a modest town. To the English, however, the American coast was far more important. Their colonies stretched along New England and Virginia, and they dreamed of controlling the entire eastern seaboard. In the 1660s, tensions exploded. England and the Netherlands went to war, fighting over trade routes, colonies, and dominance at sea. English forces attacked New Amsterdam in 1664, capturing the settlement without much resistance. The Dutch, furious, launched raids of their own in Asia and Africa. For 3 years, the two nations battled across oceans. By 1667, both sides were exhausted. Negotiations began in the Dutch city of Breda. Diplomats spread maps on tables, arguing over forts, islands, and towns. Who would get what? The English wanted their hold on New Amsterdam recognized. The Dutch wanted Run and the Bandas. And so, an agreement was reached. The Dutch would keep the tiny island of Run, ensuring their nutmeg monopoly. The English would keep Manhattan, solidifying their control over New York. On paper, it was an even trade. Two patches of land, worlds apart, swapped between empires. To understand why the Dutch agreed, we need to remember the value of spices in the 1600s. At that time, nutmeg was worth far more than furs, timber, or farmland. Manhattan was rugged and undeveloped. Run was a gold mine, its trees dropping seeds worth more than their weight in silver. The Dutch strategy was simple: dominate the spice trade, flood Europe with nutmeg, and choke out competitors. With Run secured, they now controlled every single Banda island. The VOC imposed strict monopolies. Islanders were forced to sell only to Dutch traders at Dutch prices. If they resisted, villages were burned. Anyone caught smuggling nutmeg could be executed. The Dutch even went so far as to spice-proof the islands. They cut down extra trees to prevent oversupply. They guarded seedlings like treasure, ensuring no rival could plant nutmeg elsewhere. For a while, the system worked. Dutch profits soared. Amsterdam became one of the wealthiest cities in Europe. Meanwhile, the English developed Manhattan. They renamed New Amsterdam, New York, in honor of the Duke of York. Slowly, the settlement grew. English laws, merchants, and settlers transformed the town. It became a hub for trade, finance, and immigration. By the 18th century, New York was thriving. By the 19th century, it was booming. And by the 20th, it was the financial capital of the world. What once seemed like a modest outpost became the beating heart of global commerce, home to Wall Street, skyscrapers, and millions of people. Looking back, the trade seems absurd. The Dutch gave up Manhattan, worth trillions today, for a tiny island whose monopoly could not last. Why? Because they judged wealth by the standards of their own time. In 1667, nutmeg was white gold. The future value of Manhattan was unimaginable. But history has a cruel sense of humor. By the 1700s, nutmeg was no longer exclusive to the Bandas. Smugglers and rival empires spread seeds to other colonies. The French planted nutmeg in Mauritius. The British planted it in Grenada. The Dutch monopoly collapsed. prices fell. Nutmeg was no longer treasure, it was just another spice. The Banda Islands, once the world's richest soil, faded into obscurity. Today they are quiet, remote, and sparsely populated. Run itself is a tiny village, barely known outside history books. Manhattan, on the other hand, became New York City. Its skyline rose higher than any other. Its banks and stock exchange ruled global finance. The irony could not be greater. The story of Manhattan for nutmeg is more than a historical curiosity. It is a lesson in value, time, and perspective. First, it shows how wealth is never fixed. What seems priceless in one age may be worthless in the next. The Dutch were not foolish. They were rational, given the world they knew. But history changes, markets shift, and fortunes rise and fall. Second, it shows the danger of short-term obsession. The Dutch wanted monopoly, profit, and control. The English, perhaps by accident, gained something far more enduring: land, population, and potential. Finally, it reminds us of the unpredictability of wealth. Who could have imagined that a swampy outpost in North America would become the capital of capitalism, while run would be forgotten? In the end, the deal of 1667 remains one of history's greatest ironies. The Dutch secured their nutmeg monopoly, only to see it crumble within a century. The English secured Manhattan, and with it, the foundation of New York, the world's financial powerhouse. History often hides its lessons in strange exchanges. Today, when we measure wealth in stock markets, digital currencies, or technology, we might ask ourselves, what is our nutmeg? What is today's treasure that may be tomorrow's trinket? And what overlooked Manhattan might grow into the empire of the future? This was Manhattan for nutmeg, the strangest deal in history. You've been watching Wealth Untold, where the hidden stories of money, empires, and fortune come alive. If you enjoyed this journey into the forgotten trade that shaped the modern world, don't forget to follow, share, and stay tuned. Tomorrow, we uncover another chapter of history's greatest fortunes and misfortunes.